Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Jason, you're moderating, so you're up.
I'm moderating. Okay. So this panel is what have you read over the last year? And we're going to mostly focus on the stuff we've read for a couple of different book clubs, specifically the Country Gaylaxians Book Club, which meets on the, usually on the, is it the first Tuesday or second Tuesday? Second Tuesday of each month. We've been meeting virtually for the majority of the pandemic. And then I've also been participating in the Lambda Sci-Fi book club, which also has been meeting virtually. The North Country Gaylaxians are based in Minneapolis. Lambda Sci-Fi is based in DC. They're both clubs that are part of the Gaylactic Network, the hosts of Gaylaxicon. And so why don't we go ahead and start with, we had the same panel last year at Confabulous. So we'll just pick up where we left off last year with, I have it up here, 1 second. Gideon the Ninth was our first book post Confabulous last year.
Wow,
Gideon the Ninth. It was a year ago.
Like it was long. Yes. It seems like it was longer ago than that. Okay.
Tuesday, October 13th, we discussed Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. As I recall, we all thought very positively of the book. And it is science fiction with a fantasy bent, blood and bone magic, set on various planets of the solar system after the death of the sun, I think, right? It's been a while.
Some sort of apocalypse, but yeah, it was, and it was also, as you say, blood magic. It was our October read, so we always try to do some sort of horror sort of related thing for our October read, and it did have a lot of horror elements to it. A lot of undead. You remember that the when Gideon went down and into the catacombs of her planet, right? There were just a few live people, and all the rest of them were kind of these undead ancestors and things like that.
Yep.
And so, that's the reason why we did that for our October book, was because it had that kind of horror element to it.
And I know that there's been one sequel that's come out, Harrow the Ninth, and I think a third one is due very shortly.
Yeah, so, I have not. I picked up the audiobook for the next book. I haven't listened to it yet, but I did pick it up yet. I did pick it up. Yeah, it was a. I don't know. Are we allowed to do spoilers?
I mean, it's been out for a while.
All right. So, one of the interesting things about this book was that the protagonist, Gideon the Ninth, actually dies at the end of the book.
Oh, that's right.
I mean, so the next book is about her kind of mentor / antagonist throughout the book, because Gideon is gone. You can't have the same main character, even though I know there are undead on her world, but they didn't talk about her, being able to carry on. It was just, as you recall. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think, as I said, everyone really liked it. So check out Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. We have a lot of books to cover, so we're going to move right along to our next one, which was On a Sunbeam by Tilly
Olsen.
Walden.
Holden.
Yeah, that was
Yes,
that was a
Walden.
graphic novel. Remember that was
Oh, that's right. Yes,
Yep.
yes. And again, I think we all kind of viewed it pretty positively. It was a graphic novel. It was a very dense read for a graphic novel. I think it was like 500 pages.
Yeah, it was a big, huge thing. Big book.
Not a lot of dialogue in it. So it actually read very quickly. And I think it had been a webcomic that got published by.
I believe you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it very, very interesting visuals and a world that it felt kind of almost like it could have been a companion to Gideon the Ninth in terms of like these planetoids that were having archaeological excavations on them and such.
Restorations.
The art was, for me, again, I'm not into Japanese anime and manga, but the art was, for me, was very reminiscent of that style of artwork. Did anyone else feel that way? You know, kind of that very representational rather than realistic. Do you remember?
I would say it was highly stylized.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But it was. I felt it was kind of different from what most people think of as traditional. I mean, of course the thing is that there's so many different styles of manga and anime.
Oh, of course. Yes. Of course. But yeah, it was a spaceship. You're right. It was a salvage ship, and they were going out and salvaging archaeological things. Not so much spaceships, but archaeological in preparation for the corporation that they worked for to come and reuse those sites. Remember, for new buildings or whatever it was that they were going to do. So they were trying to rescue, or salvage what they could first, and then that the company would come in afterwards and reuse the locations. So that's what they were doing, and it had, of course, the reason we read it was because, of course, it had that lesbian love story, romance to it.
Yeah, lesbian, yes, and there was also a
non-binary,
several non-binary characters as well.
Yeah. Especially that one, their engineer, who throughout the entire book you just really didn't know what's going on with that character. Was he kind of presented as male, but you weren't necessarily sure throughout the book either.
Yeah, which
Yeah, that's
John,
good.
did
That
you
was
have
a good representation?
John or Cody, did you have any comments about On a Sunbeam?
I've read other books by the same author, and I just note now that there's one we should recommend called Clementine, which is kind of from the Walking Dead universe. But I don't find her style to be like manga. I think that what I've read has been more biographical by her, and kind of her coming out as a gay woman, but as a youth, kind of moving through that part of her life. Her line drawings are really unique. Her style I find to be unlike. I have like 1,000 graphic novels right here on the shelf to my left, and here I'll give you a little view. But anyhow, so yeah, I have a lot of graphic novels, and definitely not manga in any way. But I note that On a Sunbeam is kind of a different style than some of her earlier work, and then even her later work. This new one called Clementine also seems to be a different style somewhat. So she's really talented, and she's really thoughtful, and her work is deep. Her pictures, even though they don't have a lot of words, you get a lot of emotion, and you get deep into the story from looking at each drawing. At least that's how I read her. So yeah, I'd love if we added her new one to our next year's if we're up for a graphic novel, because it's not as many words as what we usually read, our 500-page books. But yeah, she's awesome. So
Well,
I look forward to reading the one that I missed. The Honest
We're
Onion.
happy. We're happy to have graphic novels, in the mix. Absolutely.
And our next book that we're reading is only 75 pages. So
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
very short.
not the same graphic style in any way. Can't even use it in the same sentence. No.
oh, interesting. Yeah, that'll be interesting to check out. Our next book, and actually we'll talk about both of them, I think.
Sure.
So the next book was Naomi Kritzer's Catfishing on Catnet, and then that was December of last year, and then a few months ago we read her follow-up Chaos on Catnet, and she joined us
in December. We also read her collection of short stories as well.
Oh, that's right.
that
Yes,
universe.
yes. Cat Pictures, Please, and Other Stories.
I've had that on hold for like 3 months. I think the Hennepin County Library has like one copy of that, and I still can't get a hold of it. But you can read a couple of her short stories online, just kind of out there on the internet. A lot of her short stories are just there, so I've been doing that.
And then what's the we should mention that most of us actually know and are friends with Naomi, and she joined us for both discussions, and it was a good time, both reading the book and having her at the discussion. Anyone want to, John, you haven't spoken a lot so far. Do you want to say anything about either of any of the books?
I haven't read them. I like Cat Picture Please a lot, the short story, which won the Hugo. So
Okay.
I'm not the best person to speak to Naomi's work.
No problem.
Well,
No problem.
Naomi is a local author here in Minneapolis.
Yep.
And her two novels are based here in Minneapolis, although the first one does also travel across the country, out to ends up in the Boston area, ultimately, where MIT is, Cambridge. That's the word I'm looking for. But that's a Boston suburb. So, but yeah, that's especially the second novel is almost entirely based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so it's kind of interesting to see where how Naomi brought landmarks and things into the novels that those of us who live here are quite familiar with,
Yeah.
including unfortunately the destruction of James J. Hill House. It is what it is, so.
And while they're both very much science fiction novels, Catfishing got nominated. I don't remember if it won or not, but it got nominated for an Edgar Award for young adult mystery. And I'm not sure if Chaos did as well, but yeah, and that I think that's quite interesting, that kind of genre crossover. We are getting some comments in the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm just gonna tell David to try again, and I'll there we go. There we go. Got it. Sorry about that, David.
I just want to say, for anyone else watching on YouTube, if you have any questions, please, questions or comments, please go ahead and submit them in the channel. If you have questions, we'll read them on air and try and answer them. for comments. You know, everyone should be able to read them in the comment panel. So
there was just a referendum vote this week, in fact, on something related to the fictional plot of Chaos on Catnet. So I feel that she really, with her fiction, tried hard to envision a future that I don't know. It just she was really trying at least in the second book of the series, to come up with a Minneapolis that would be a reflection of progress. So her fiction was like she was trying. I don't know. I don't know that I would call it utopian, but I would call it. She was trying to make an improvement. She brought back Uncle Hugo's and put a cool sculpture, a spaceship or something in front. The cops handing out coats, winter coats, when it was particularly chilly, vouchers for coats, that is. She named the street after George Floyd, you know, just a regular street name. She'd switch the names, and I don't know, there's just a lot of stuff on there that was a really nice touch, and made it super relevant to the year that it came out. And I hope it's still relevant when people read it a long time from now. I know kids like it. I know several kids who really liked it.
Definitely. Yeah. The next book that we read was Yoon-Ha Lee's Hex Arcade Stories, short story set in the Hex Arcade universe. Yoon-Ha Lee was a guest at the last Gaylaxicon, and joined us for the discussion. I unfortunately did not make it very far into the short stories because I had not read I know previously we had actually read one of the novels, and I had not read that, and I was getting a little, in terms of the world, I was like, okay, these are interesting stories, but I don't, I'm floundering a bit. So,
I bet John read all of those.
I've read all of his Hex Arcade books that have been published, and I've read this one twice. So I've read the stories twice.
Nice.
And Yoon has shared with me the role-playing game he has written that is set in the Hex Arcade universe. I thought about pitching a game session actually for this convention because it needs to be play tested, but you know, I didn't quite have time to read the rules as well as the rules for Thirsty Sword Lesbians. So which I am running. So I'm a big fan of his stories, and it's set in an extremely nasty universe. I'm not sure if Harrow the Ninth's universe, Gideon the Ninth's universe is worse or not.
That's a good question. That's a close call.
I can't say this one is better because it doesn't have undead, because there is a character who's returned from the dead numerous times, Jeddo, sort of revived when necessary. But I think for me, the stories are pretty fun because they show little slices of life, some for ordinary people, some for not so ordinary people in this rather nasty universe that's a space opera universe.
And one of the things about the short stories that's just interesting too is that he takes a historical perspective from them, as you recall, right? So that the first story is the furthest back in time. And as you read the short stories, they move forward in time in the universe. So they're all in that universe, but they are, although not necessarily, some of them are connected, but like great grandkids of the previous story or something like that, you know. But they are all in a line temporally, which I thought was interesting.
I will say, just as a plug for future reading, Yoon's latest book is a series of queer fairy tales, essentially, that just came out, and it has fox in the title. I think The Fox's Tower might be the name of it. But that's something I'm going to suggest for next year. They're all sort of flash fiction or extremely short fairy tales and pretty queer themed.
That would be great.
Yeah, the universe, the Hex Arcade universe is, Jason, to be fair to you, it is a difficult universe to get into initially. The whole calendar magic system is pretty whacked out there, and so I can understand why it was difficult to jump in.
I mean, the short story that I did read was the one about the heist, and I mean, it was an interesting heist. It just, all the other stuff surrounding it, it was a little outside of my frame of reference.
Sure.
The next book that we read in February was Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. Again, one that everyone enjoyed. Thank you, John. Yes. It's a young adult novel set around a Day of the Dead celebration in Los Angeles, with some trans and non-binary characters, and specifically surrounding a family who, there's a lot of supernatural elements in it. Brujos and brujas and brujex, I guess.
And a ghost.
I'm not quite sure.
Ghosts.
It's a Latinx community, and then that book was also one that we read for Lambda Sci-Fi a few months ago as well. There's been a lot of crossover, actually. So, and in both cases, in both groups, really enjoyed it.
John, do you remember it won? Was it the Hugo? It won, or was it it won some awards? Do you recall? I can't remember whether it was the Hugo or whether it was one of the young adult awards.
I think it did win an award, and the cover matter isn't cluing me in to what it won.
It probably got the award after it was printed.
Probably, yes.
David, did you read Cemetery Boys?
I never quite finished it, but yeah, I read most of it and I liked it. Some other group locally also discussed it just in the last couple months.
Yeah, it was a really enjoyable read. It was, again, young adults, so it was pretty easy, right? And the main character, the protagonist, as Jason said, is a trans Latinx character, which was and part of the whole thing of the story is him trying to figure out. I mean, it turns out, of course, that it wasn't a problem, but he didn't know that they didn't know that at the time.
His family thinks it's a problem, but the supernatural forces don't see it as a problem.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. In this case, I do want to kind of avoid spoilers, because it is really good, and I recommend people reading it without too much foreknowledge. And I believe Aidan has talked about a follow-up book. So, Cody, did you have something to say?
I did. I really enjoyed that book. I was thinking about it today, actually, so I won't give any spoilers, but I thought the character development was super believable. Other than like the culture, there's a lot of cultural depth. Like we learned a lot about this kind of part of it was real, part of it was fictional, and part of it was not. Part of it was not fictional. Part of it was, actually shedding light on the culture, on the food, on a lot of traditions and so forth. But there were there were, you know, all the fictional elements that were really enjoyable, but to me it was also the really believable character angst. There was so much angst when the teen kind of wasn't believed or wasn't given credence, you know, because of the gender, the initial gender, and then kind of evolved to being believed and being accepted. I'm trying not to give any spoilers here, but I really was thinking about that today, that you know, it's reflective of a lot of people's true stories in life, that they're not always believed or respected when they're young, and they're expected to be something that they're not, you know. And so that's why that I felt that book was really good and almost underrated. Like, you know, I don't know how much positive publicity it has. I think every teen library collection, I haven't seen it on the shelf since we read it for the book club, but there was online access in our library system, and I loved it. I think that's a great book, and I hope the author writes more. So.
It's also a book anchored in a real place. It is anchored in the Los Angeles area, and so again, it has again, I don't know the Los Angeles area that well, but it has references to places in the Los Angeles area. So again, another book anchored in a real current modern day time and place.
Actually, I read a lot of books for the long list for the Children's Fantasy Award for the Mythopoeic Society this year, and a number of the books overlap in a lot of ways with this book. I mean, not directly in terms of plot and the world exactly, but the use of Hispanic culture in a number of other books I read this year was reminiscent of this, and also ghosts, incidentally, and Day of the Dead and stuff.
The next book that we read was a short story, The Deep by River Solomon, which was written in conjunction with a song, I believe, and I forget the name of it's someone from Hamilton.
There were actually 4 people involved in the writing of that song, and they also brought different angles to it or something. And I've listened to the music, but it didn't stick with me very well. I thought this was a pretty engrossing story, but I didn't think it was as good as, what did we read before by River Solomon?
An Unkindness of Ghosts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah, that was
thought
good.
that worked better.
It was The Deep, you know, it was, again, kind of a fascinating world building type of thing with kind of the origin of mermaids, so to speak, that also had to do with people thrown overboard from slave ships.
Yeah, and that's something that's been taken up in 2 other books that I've read in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of stuff that I didn't know about.
The science fictional or fantastic nature of the story is really tied in with West African indigenous religions and with voodoo in Haiti, and sort of the legends of a place under the sea, Guinea, where spirits come from, and with La Sirene, who's one of the spirits or divine beings in voodoo, who's a sea creature, or either a whale or a mermaid, depending on your view. So it really touched on all those things. I remember at the time some people felt that it was not sort of very plausible science fiction, but I'm not sure it was really intended to be either. So, and it was a pretty short read. So
I think it works on a more fantastic sort of axis or something. It's not exactly, it doesn't exactly follow some of our science fictional world building rules, but I think it works thematically or symbolically or something in a number of respects, and it is kind of haunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think we
okay.
didn't talk about that. I mean, there was a gay romance in the book that I thought was a rich story. I thought the character, again, that's another book where I thought the character development was very deep. I mean, we really felt the emotions of the main character, and then the person that the relationship was with. I feel that, you know, there was a lot of depth in description and character development. So, you know, whatever you might say about the plausibility of the science fiction, I'm always kind of interested in the human, or in this case, not necessarily human, but somewhat human relationship. And it was, I thought that part of it was really awesome. And I'll never forget, you know, what I learned about history. You know, I went and Googled all the history that was referred to in the song and in the book. So it made a big impact on me reading it. Pretty cool.
The next book we read was Rebecca Roanhorse's Black Sun, which I quite enjoyed up until the end, when I realized that it was not the end.
For part 1 of 3. and yeah,
It's like, what is it, one of 5 books or something?
Yeah, well, part 1 at least of 3, and a lot of, unlike a lot of trilogies, it didn't really, as Jason said, it didn't really have a kind of, let's end this book and start the next book. It was kind of like, oh, we're going to end this one, and then everything is still hanging. So, but it was an excellent book. I'm really looking forward to it. And you know, and of course, Rebecca Roanhorse is an indigenous woman, and so that, you know, it was interesting to reading that from that perspective too.
I also read a YA book that she did this year, and I have to say I had huge problems with that. But I actually quite liked Black Sun.
What was the YA book?
Voyage to the Sun or something? I don't remember. It's,
yeah, I mean, Black Sun, again, excellent world building, some very interesting magic being going on, the religions that are being touched on are fascinating, but yeah, it does just kind of end. If it's a trilogy, you know, it's like, I would, if you're thinking of starting this, I would suggest waiting until the second book is out, but then you might end up in the same boat.
Yeah, what?
I don't agree. I totally don't agree. I went into this being totally intimidated because it's a really long book, and I thought I wouldn't like it, but I love this book, and I found the ending satisfying. I know that we were left hanging in many respects, but I was satisfied that, you know, like, there were certain elements that I needed to know about who survived and who didn't, and I felt those questions were answered for me. I love this book, so no, I'm happy with it as it was. Great book, and one of 2 books that we've read in this book club in this year in which people's eyes were gouged out so that they were blind to enhance their powers. How is it possible you've read 2 books that there's probably some word for gouging out people's eyes in the name of something or other, but that's a crazy coincidence.
But yeah, like you, I like the culture. You know, she had, you know, the 4 great families, right? And each of the families had their own totem, and the totem, you know, was you know, active in their lives. I mean, it was actually real things. You know, there was the water strider, and then the crows, and the eagle, right? The great eagles, and then the serpents. And then, you know, she had the kind of that underclass where you know, those were the 4 kind of upper class people, and then above them you even had the priesthood, and then you also had that whole underclass area, things like that. So I think she did a really good job of world building, and so I really did like the book a lot.
Absolutely, I'm definitely looking forward to the next one.
The YA novel is actually called Race to the Sun, and it's not set in the world of Black Sun. It's set sort of in our world, but within the world of, is it Navajo myth or Hopi myth or something? So she draws a lot more on actual native traditions, legends.
I recall that she's Navajo, I think.
Yeah, I sort of thought it was Navajo, but
Any comments from you, John?
Well, so for this book, I enjoyed it. I felt it kind of dead ended, like people were saying. Wait for the sequel. I remember from our discussion, although one of the protagonists is a female pirate, kind of Taino, or sort of Caribbean native. She sleeps with lots of women when she's a pirate and drunk, but she seemed to end up like heading towards a romance with this boy who gouged his eyes out. So there was some comment about like, well, how queer is this narrative? I guess we're just going to have to see how things progress. I really enjoyed it. I'm certainly a little bit familiar with the Southwest, which is part of where she's writing about, although the Pueblo communities didn't exactly look like these mega cities that she's describing, and a little bit familiar with some of the kind of Mayan cultures that she's also sort of playing with here. So it was kind of interesting to see somebody who is native kind of create indigenous societies that have nothing to do with European societies. There are no Europeans here, and see what she did with it. So I definitely read the sequel.
And that should be out soon. The next book was The Republic of Vengeance, which is not the original title, by Mark Waters. Do you recall what the original title is, John?
I think the original title was Of Merchants and Soldiers, or Of Merchants and Scholars.
No,
And
not
also,
scholars,
I
but
did the wrong name. It's Paul Waters, not Mark Waters.
Paul Waters, yep.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Republic of Vengeance was the U.S. name. It originally
Yes.
had a different name in Great Britain.
Yep. And the American name, I think we can agree, is more compelling. And it also has David's painting of the Oath of the Horatii on the cover, which always catches my attention.
I would say that the title might be more compelling, but also a little misleading.
yeah, I actually think the original title is probably more representative. But
yeah, well, it tells the story of a young man who sees his father and everybody else on the ship he's in murdered by pirates, and so he's a Roman, although from a rural area. And the story is set in the time of the Roman Republic, and various mopping up operations are going on in southern Italy due to Hannibal's invasion.
The Punic Wars, the end of the Punic Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of a snapshot of Rome and of southern Italy with its Greek influences. I think a lot of the action takes place in Brundisium, which is a Greek city in Italy that got slowly Romanized. And I think one of the themes of it is friendship, and another theme is like vengeance, and what, like, do you spend your whole life pursuing vengeance? And what does that do to you if you do? And you get to see the development of this youth into a soldier, and the partner of a Greek man that he falls in love with. It's not fantasy and it's not science fiction. I think it is definitely an LGBT novel. I know that when I bought it in Uncle Hugo's, when Elizabeth sold it to me, she said I'd probably like it, but a lot of the people who buy historicals there said they didn't really want to buy any more novels with him because of all the gay stuff. And there's like practically, I don't think there even is any sex in the novel. There's just a lot of love and like lingering gazes and things like that.
No. They actually do have sex a couple times toward the end of the novel.
Sure.
But it's not spelled out.
Right.
Out.
Yeah.
It just says,
it's
we
not
went
like
to
you're
bed
reading
and we get up in
Dahlgren.
the morning. Right. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
it
or
would have been
Madman or
better.
something. Yes.
Maybe they would have liked it better if it was spelled out, because then they wouldn't have had to imagine it. Anyway,
But no, it's one of those kind of historical alternate history sort of things, and as John says, a good part of it also takes part in Greece when there's the war, the last of the Macedonian wars, and so forth, where they're involved with that. But yeah, there's a lot of good culture, and again, just from a personal perspective, I love that era, that time period. So I really liked the book because again, it brought in a lot of history and culture of the era. And while true, the main characters are all of the of the equestrian class, as John said, they were not from Rome. They were from the smaller provinces, but provincial. But they were still of the upper class. So
The original title was Of Merchants and Heroes.
Oh.
And at some point, John mentioned that he'd picked up the duology that Paul Waters wrote set in Roman Britain. Do you want to say anything about that, John?
I got them for cheap on Amazon. I think one was a library resale and the other was remaindered. I have not read them yet, but I believe they are set in Roman Britain, perhaps around the time of the war against Boudica. So at the time I picked those up, I was watching this really fantastic series. Oh gosh, what is the name of it? It's called Britannia, that is set in Roman Britain at the time of the Roman conquest of Britain and Boudica's resistance. So they're there and waiting for the snow to fall.
the next book was Masters of Poisons by Andrea Hairston. We probably aren't going to, or Master of Poisons. We're probably not going to spend a lot of time talking about that one. I know that I didn't finish it. As I recall, people didn't straight out dislike it, but it was just very dense and very difficult to get into.
Again, another odd culture, and it was another book about religion being, what's the word? Where religion is the government.
It really wasn't a big hit with any of us.
Theocracy.
And most of us didn't finish.
Theocracy, yeah. It was another book about a theocracy, and it didn't really, I didn't really care for it, and there weren't characters that I felt that I could associate. I mean, could feel for it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just never felt that they were something that could draw me in.
Let's move on to Silk and Steel because we're running out of time.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one was Silk and Steel, which was a anthology edited by Janine A. Southard with contributor Jennifer Mace. And I think we had, I was not at that session, but didn't we have some people join us for that?
I think two of them, yeah.
At the last minute, Django couldn't join us. Something else came up and he had to do something else.
Yeah. Janine Southard and Jennifer Mace joined us for that.
And that
This was like my favorite thing that we read this year because it had such a breadth and depth, and some of the stories super duper spoke to me. There's just this one author, and I'm trying to find anything else she's written. She's only written a couple of other things. It was called Positively Medieval. But the plot and the historical context and the sci-fi in that were totally and utterly different than the ones in my next favorite one. It was such a rich collection.
Was that the one where she's on a like a there's a vacation thing and they send people back in time?
No, that was the ogre. Or the troll. I can't remember if it was an ogre or a troll. And then they had this thing in that society where if you committed some sort of minor crime, people would trash your personality for half an hour and make you feel like really bad. But that was kind of the weird sci-fi aspect, other than the fact that trolls and humans were integrated. Or was it ogres? I can't remember what it was, but it was such a powerful story. But along with 10 other super powerful stories, and they covered so many different aspects of history and fantasy, and I love this book. Oh my God.
The premise of the book, according to the editors, was that they wanted to have a book where they were all about lesbian romances, but where the protagonists were all heroic people,
lots of swords.
Not superheroes, but the swords and sorcery. But instead of having the men be the heroes, it was the women being the heroes, which was it was an interesting premise.
And it worked. It worked on me. It totally worked. They were all amazing heroes, but in totally different ways. Not like they were super like smart and creative solutions and just different twists. And they were heroes in special ways, not just in. I mean, some were swordswomen who just beat the enemy, but it was more than that. Way more than that.
Yeah, I thought it was just a really great collection of delightful.
Like any anthology, there were better ones and worse ones, but I agree with Cody that there weren't any that I just didn't like. I didn't think there were any bad ones, but again, like any anthology, there are going to be ones that you like more than others. But yeah, I don't think there were any clinkers in that collection. I think they were all good stories. So strongly recommend that one. And again, it's a short story collection, so
The next one was Chaos on Continent, which we've already discussed, and then the book for September was Dancing Jack by Lori Marks. And thank you to John for passing on your copy of that to me, which I was able to read in I think 3 days before the book club.
Yeah, I found that I liked this better than her 4 books, which I haven't read. I have only read half of that, but that people always talk about. I really liked this book a lot in the end.
Yeah, it was a book that was mostly set on a steamship, riverboat, going up what seemed to be the Mississippi, an analog for the Mississippi, and it was quite enjoyable. Very, very compelling. I tend to read mostly ebooks these days because my eyes are not what they used to be. But I read the paperback and I'm like, all right, where's my reading glasses? Let's get going. Let's keep going. Anyone else have comments about Dancing Jack?
I liked it. I could see the connections to her later novels, the Elemental Logic series, but I kind of liked the fact that it was playing with the Mississippi and kind of left me to wonder what else she might have developed in that setting. I don't think she ever wrote any further novels in that setting, although she has a bunch of novels that she wrote between this one or before this one and the Elemental Logic series, which I have not read. And they're probably all out of print.
I liked the romance between the two principal characters. I didn't quite believe the ending, but maybe I was just feeling too depressed or something. But I of course was happy with the ending, and I thought that the way that they evoke magic and power is something that she does in the later books, but it worked very well for me here.
Cody, did you?
I went to great lengths to get this book because I could only find it on Abe Books, and in the end I was glad I did. It was a really memorable story, very vivid details and world building. So yeah, I was really glad I went out of the way to get this book.
Yeah, it was difficult to track down because sadly it is out of print. And then the last book club was the book Blood Moon by Catherine Lundoff, and then Lambda Sci-Fi also for the month of October read Silver Moon. The two books, the first one was Silver Moon and the second one was Blood Moon. Silver Moon, the NCG had read previously, and so we read Blood Moon, which just got released just a few months ago, and then Lambda read Silver Moon. Catherine joined us for both sessions.
Another local author, we know.
Another local Minneapolis author. Both very enjoyable. The way I described it was menopausal lesbian werewolves. And most people,
the way she describes it.
Yeah. Most people I know really enjoyed that as the descriptor. So, and yeah, they're both fun reads. Again, you have the kind of cross, especially with the Blood Moon, you have the crossover between science fiction / fantasy and mystery.
Yes, it was very much a mystery. This was very much a mystery. Yep.
Yeah.
Which the first one, Silver Moon was not a mystery, but this one definitely was a police procedural mystery. And because the deputy sheriff who's will be running for sheriff at some point in the next book was a main character in this as well. So yeah, it definitely had that police procedural mystery about it as well. And I think that Catherine has put together a good a good world building here. It takes place in most likely Colorado-ish. Catherine, when we talked to her, when she joined our group, she said, well, yeah, probably there, but that kind of area, some sort of mountainous terrain out west. She said she specifically leaves it very vague why this one valley has the power over menopausal women to change them into werewolves. She said it's not important. It just is. Which I think is that's kind of more power to her. Why muddy the waters if you don't have to. But yeah, it had a very nice love story. Once again, it's another one of the books that we've read many of them where you're like, oh, come on, you two, get together. But at least they did get together before by the last chapter. Some of the books we've read, you're like the two main characters are dancing around each other for 3 books before they get together,
So just a couple of stats about what we've read over the past year.
But anyway, just any other, before you go on, any other comments?
We didn't mention the last one. We didn't mention the last one, The World of Cockroaches. I've read it twice now. We're going to discuss it in the next week. It was so exciting. The Jen Hale book, The Maceborn Trouble. That we're going to discuss it. I agree. We haven't discussed it, but I've read it twice now. It's freaking awesome book.
Oh yeah. I was gonna mention that, but
anything else about Blood Moon before we move on? Yeah. Anything else about Blood Moon before we move on real quick? Because I was the only one talking. Any other comments? Sorry, Jason, go ahead.
So this coming Tuesday, we are going to be discussing Mazeborn Troubles by Jen Hale. Jen Hale will be joining us. It is a short read, only about 75 pages. So there's still plenty of time for people to read it and join our discussion. You can find the link to the discussion on our Facebook group. And if you want to be on our mailing list, you can send us a message and we can add you to our mailing list. It's
a Google group.
Yep, it's a Google group. I believe it's only available, Mazeborn Trouble is only available as an ebook. So I just wanted to real quick do the stats on the books that we read this past year. Let's see, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books by female authors, 2 books by trans men, and 1 book, I assume, by a cis male author. I don't know if he is gay or not, but I think in terms of reading by non-cis white male, we got it covered. So
and also we also read a couple of books by indigenous people this year, and Latinx. I mean, we really tried to broaden our perspective on who we're reading books by. So that was a really good year for that.
Which is refreshing considering some of the other book clubs I'm in, which I'm sure John can understand that comment. Without naming names. We will be soon having a session where we'll be figuring out what we're going to read for 2022. So if anyone is interested in joining us for the next couple of months, it's the second Tuesday of each month, virtual. We meet on Zoom, and you can join the North Country Gaylaxians Facebook group, which I'll put that into the you see the MN Confabulous, but we'll provide links to the North Country Gaylaxians if you want to join and participate in those discussions and help us figure out what we're going to read for 2022.
December is the month that we do put our initial list together for 2022, and then January is the month when we finalize it. So,
and for our December book club, we're going to be discussing the Moomin books. Who is the author of the Moomin books?
David would tell us if you were here.
That's when David walks away. We're going a few minutes over, but we started a little bit late too. But David, who wrote the Moomin books?
Tove Jensen.
Thank you, Cody.
Another lesbian writer.
Yes.
Okay.
And those are children's books. How graphical are they?
There's lots of illustrations, but they're not picture books.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
And she drew the illustrations.
So they're classics of children's literature. And where is she from?
She was a member of the Swedish-speaking minority in Finland.
Okay, gotcha.
So her books are Finnish, but they were a big hit in Sweden too, which of course is like 10 times the size of Finland. And they eventually became a huge hit across the world. There was
Japan. There's an amusement park in Japan, I think.
Yes, there is, and also one in Finland, in Helsinki.
And they must have some subversive themes, because I know that they're kind of considered left-wing children's literature by some people.
Well, they're Finnish. I mean, what they're kind of left wing, just almost by coming out of Scandinavia, but maybe particularly Finland. But it's kind of interesting. I only know this because someone wrote a paper and presented it at the children's conference. This expert, I guess, who interviewed her and looked into it, said she quit writing the books because she felt her lesbianism was coming through too strongly in the books. And she really didn't know if that was right for children's books. It seems like a very odd sort of argument, but that's when I first learned she was a lesbian. But she also was a noted painter in Finland, and I would like to see her paintings. And there's recently been a new film about her called Tove, Tove. And I have not seen that film, but I'm sort of hoping to track it down before our meeting in December. If anyone has,
well, we're a little over. If you want to continue the discussion, we do have discussion rooms available on our Discord channels.
Yep. You can pop into the con suite.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, David, I'll keep an eye out for that movie to see if I can find it through any of my sources, and we can set up a screening. Thank you to everyone. Hope that you all had some good reading experiences this year, and that we have some great ones next year, and that, the next Confabulous, we can have this panel in person.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.
That's a nice smile, John.